Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're trying to cut through a lot of complexity.
We really are.
We've been handed this stack of sources that use what our reader called heavy and symbolic language to talk about U.S. political priorities.
Right.
So our mission today is to take this really high-level, dense narrative about power and just translate it. Turn it into something clear, digestible, and focused on one big theme.
And that theme is oil.
That theme is oil.
And, when analysts and political writers do that, when they use symbolic language, they're not just trying to sound clever.
No.
They're signaling that they believe the subject has all these layers of meaning, far beyond just its face value. So in this deep dive, we're decoding that.
Okay.
And the core message is that for U.S. policymakers, political satisfaction is, well, it's often measured in barrels per day, and geopolitical control.
That idea of satisfaction is really key here. Let's start there because we all define satisfaction differently based on context. I mean, if you're running low on energy, satisfaction might just be a great cup of coffee. If you're managing a national budget, it's probably, a stable interest rate?
Exactly. But according to the narrative in these sources, for the power structures we're talking about, satisfaction is profoundly tied to control over energy.
Specifically crude oil.
Absolutely. The sources use crude oil, they even call it black oil sometimes, as a stand-in for geopolitical influence. The premise is pretty stark. Energy dominance is political satisfaction.
And to really get how that metaphor works, we need to look at this one moment. It's singular, almost absurd, and it just perfectly captured this duality.
She's talking about the pin.
I'm talking about the pin, a very serious, high-stakes White House meeting that gets completely sidetracked by a cartoon pin.
Okay, so let's dive into that. This idea of oil as the ultimate symbol of power.
Right.
We have to analyze the literal power first, I think, before the symbolic stuff really makes sense.
Makes sense.
So why does crude oil hold this, this irreplaceable strategic value? Because despite this huge global push for renewables, in the short to medium term, oil is still the fundamental resource for global power projection.
You're talking about mobility, specifically military mobility.
Precisely. Yeah. It fuels the planes, the tanks.
The ships.
The ships. A modern military cannot function without secure, robust access to petroleum. So controlling oil isn't just an economic advantage, it's a necessity for national security. If you don't control the flow, you're vulnerable.
But, I mean, that's just the military side of it. In terms of the market, we are seeing a shift, aren't we? Does this idea of oil as the ultimate symbol of power, is it starting to feel a bit outdated?
That's a really important question. But the sources argue that while the long-term trend is definitely toward renewables, the current mechanism for global market control is still oil.
How so?
Well, think about its role in dictating global currency. Oil transactions are overwhelmingly done in U.S. dollars, the petrodollar system.
Right.
So control over the oil supply chain is also, indirect control over the strength and stability of the dollar. When the sources talk symbolically about oil, they're talking about this combined power of military readiness, economic leverage, and currency stability.
So it all comes together. If oil grants this kind of massive strategic power, it makes sense that the political writers would use such heavy language. It's not just a commodity.
Exactly. It's a strategic construct. When you see phrases equating oil policy with national satisfaction or greatness, the writer is trying to show that these policies are fundamentally about maximizing control. This resource is literally why countries go to war or use sanctions.
It determines who wins and who loses.
Right. It determines winners and losers in global politics. So oil means control, whether it's powering your car or becoming the subject of some huge diplomatic push.
Okay, let's pivot now from this abstract definition of power to that specific anecdote the sources highlighted, the pin. So it's Friday morning at the White House. You've got high-level executives from major oil companies all gathered for a very serious closed-door meeting.
And you really can't overstate how important this meeting was. They were there to discuss production quotas, the strategic reserve, future energy strategy, the whole thing.
The core agenda was achieving energy dominance.
Yep.
But the whole thing takes on this surreal quality because of one tiny visual detail that the president introduces. He walks into the meeting and later talks to the press wearing the small, colorful cartoon pin on his jacket.
A pin showing this wide, grinning caricature of himself, which he cheerfully called Happy Trump.
It's just such a jarring contrast. You have this immense geopolitical seriousness being discussed inside and then this silly cartoon pin on the outside.
And, of course, the reporters immediately jumped on it. They had to ask him about this symbol of, cartoonish joy.
And this is where the contradiction becomes the entire narrative. He jokes that he's never happy and never satisfied.
He says his only satisfaction would come when America was great again. So you have the pin projecting this simple personal happiness, while his words insist on this massive, almost unattainable national political goal.
It's almost like a smokescreen. The light, trivial object sort of diverts attention just enough, but at the same time, it lets the administration project an image of confidence.
That's the key synthesis the sources offer. The pin and the photos, they spread everywhere. But for many observers, especially people following foreign policy, the pin wasn't just a joke.
They read more into it.
They read it as a deliberate projection of confidence, a sign that the administration felt secure and satisfied after some very specific recent actions aimed at resource control in Latin America.
Specifically Venezuela.
Specifically Venezuela. So this superficial joke about being happy was instantly hijacked by this massive geopolitical implication of resource control, tying the president's perceived mood to a foreign policy outcome.
It really forces you, as the listener, to question what the real goal is. When a leader says he's never satisfied, the real goal isn't personal contentment.
No, it's maximizing strategic control. And that huge contradiction in the cartoon pin, it forces us to look past the surface and ask, what was really being talked about in that room? What happened that made the administration feel the need to project so much confidence?
Which brings us right to the policy deep dive, the crucial role of Venezuela in all of this. Because the seriousness of this topic is just, it's a world away from a joke about a pin.
The serious substance was absolutely paramount. The U.S. policy objective for Venezuela's oil is immense. We're talking about some of the world's largest proven reserves of heavy crude.
Huge.
And for U.S. officials, there's a strong belief that if oil production there starts again, and we have to strut at the condition, if that production happens under new control, it could drastically rebalance global oil markets.
And rebalancing the market means more supply, lower global prices, which translates directly into economic satisfaction for U.S. consumers.
And political leverage for the administration.
Exactly.
But it's not simple.
No.
You asked about context earlier. The context in Venezuela is years of sanctions, political instability, and just massive infrastructure decay. The oil fields, the refineries, they're in desperate need of investment and expertise.
So the policy discussion wasn't just about wanting Venezuela's oil back online. It was about the logistical reality of how U.S. companies could actually make that happen.
And how they could do it while ensuring American control over the output. That's precisely right. The sources noted just how granular the discussion got.
What were they talking about specifically?
They focused on three main areas. First, setting realistic estimates for how much oil could be brought online in the near term. That determines the impact on global markets.
Okay.
Second, establishing new investment rules. So creating a legal and regulatory framework that would protect U.S. corporate investments and, ensure they could get their profits out in a volatile environment.
Which sounds a lot like setting up the conditions for U.S. companies to basically take charge of the whole operation.
That's the strategic implication of new control. Yes. And the third point was defining the exact role U.S. companies would play. This isn't just money. It's about providing the technical expertise, the engineering, the logistics that Venezuela currently lacks.
And by defining that role, the U.S. essentially gets a reliable, close, and politically aligned source of supply.
Which is a massive geopolitical lever against competitors.
So the narrative becomes much clearer. The serious pursuit of global energy dominance, which we see in the Venezuela policy talks, is the real reason for the confidence being projected by the administration.
A confidence that was just symbolized by a lighthearted cartoon pin.
It shows how intertwined domestic politics and global resource strategy really are.
Absolutely. That ultimate satisfaction, America becoming great again, to use the president's phrase, is defined by achieving that strategic control over resources like Venezuela's oil. That stabilizes the domestic economy and maximizes global influence.
The policy, the commodity, and the symbol, they all just line up perfectly.
You really do.
So why should you, the listener, care about the story of a goofy pin worn on a Friday morning? Because that seemingly trivial moment gave us a crystal clear window into massive, high-stakes geopolitical strategy tied directly to resource control.
The pin was the theater.
And the Venezuela discussion was the real play. The serious agenda was masked by a joke, but the underlying purpose. It's that operational metaphor from our sources.
If you can shape the future of a key global oil supplier, you get a measure of strategic control that translates directly into political power. And that control, in the context of these talks, is the true meaning of political satisfaction.
It's an operational metaphor that played out right in front of us. We tracked the duality from the simple visual of personal satisfaction, the happy Trump pin,
all the way to the complex strategic moves aimed at national satisfaction through energy dominance.
and as a final note on the practical outcomes of that meeting, the White House did promise that more details would be coming soon.
Yeah, regarding the specific production limits and the investment rules they talked about with the whale execs. So the real-world impact of that projected confidence is still unfolding.
We'll certainly be watching for those details. And for you, the listener, here is a final provocative thought to consider after this deep dive. If the symbolic language of our sources implies that for U.S. leaders, happiness is the same as control through oil, what does that suggest about the true drivers of global stability?
And if we accept that premise, how does that political pursuit of resource dominance shape our understanding of international intervention?
It changes the whole frame.
It really does. And to expand on that thought, where else in the world do we see crucial commodities, whether it's crude oil or rare earth minerals, or even control of fresh water acting not just as products, but as these powerful, almost cultural metaphors for national identity and strategic control? It's a concept that really helps unlock the real stakes behind political actions.
A perfect place to leave our deep dive. Thank you for joining us.